Riverwood is a great place to visit. It looks wild, and it is wild, but it's a very small property. But it has many of the advantages and many of the problems that you would find in a park like Yellowstone. One of our biggest problems is you and me, humans, using the property. We've taken over space that was once wild lands. Your house where you live was once a wild area. And I'm not saying we don't have people living here. That's not the point. But the problem with Yellowstone and with the Serengeti and with Riverwood is, how do you manage people? So one of the things Yellowstone has done, it has decided there are high impact areas, like around the various villages and the geyser ponds and whatnot. We have not made that decision at Riverwood quite so formally, but if you go to Riverwood, the most visited area would be our gardens, and then our lawns, and then you get into the trails. The trails, which equate to the roads in Yellowstone, are where people move about and see wildlife and plants and enjoy the parks. And that's great. I mean, I think that's really important that we do that. The problem is once you get off those trails. So you have to have low impact areas if you're going to want to have wildlife. And we have places in Riverwood that probably should be designated as no-go areas. And we've had conversations about that with the Conservancy, with Great Valley, to try and set up those no-go areas. But people don't really follow the rules to stick to the trails. There's always somebody that wants to go around and poke into the bushes. Fishermen make a myriad of trails getting to the river. So one of the things we need to work on, I think, and Yellowstone has worked on, is how to move people around safely and to provide the facilities for them, so that we don't go off trail, we don't go making trails. So in Yellowstone, if there's a grizzly bear that's in the area, they close off the trails. Well, we don't have a grizzly bear or even a black bear where we can say, you can't go there because there's a danger from a bear. That would be, probably not a good idea. We don't want to encourage that, but we should have the ability to say to people, this is a sensitive habitat, please stay out of it, and try and direct them away. Now, we have got some educational signs up. You may have seen the picture of the doe with a fawn that's saying, sensitive area, don't go here. But what we have to do is rely on you people to follow and heed those rules. But even so, there should be an area that is set aside only for wildlife, where a fawn can be raised, where coyotes can have their pups, where birds can nest without having to worry about people wandering through their habitat. And the problem is, Riverwood isn't big enough to really have that kind of sustainable thing. And that's where you get back to the greater Riverwood ecosystem. We need to think of trail systems that will lead you and me up into other parts so that we can have those experiences north of the Pinchon property, up in towards Streetsville, up to Meadowvale, where we are walking through areas that are less crowded with people, where wildlife are more common, and maybe there's no bridge across the river, so we can't get to certain areas, or we have indicated that these forests are off limits. Now, Yellowstone, the Serengeti, every national park that I visited pretty much has those areas. Some of them are no-brainers. You can't get to them anyhow. But a lot of them are areas like in Yellowstone where the pelicans nest, you cannot visit that. And it's patrolled and it is maintained and watched over so that you don't go there. And maybe at some point we might have to think about having more regular enforcement in Riverwood in order to maintain that balance. And it's a balance that the public wants. They want to be able to see a deer. They want to be able to hear an owl hoot. They want to see young ducklings. They want to see turtles in the pond. But we have to make those things possible by providing them habitat. And that's one of the lessons from Yellowstone. Now, Yellowstone has other lessons that we can learn too. Yellowstone has a migratory animal, the bison, leaves the park every year. And it gets into trouble because it goes into people's yards and might cause some havoc. We have white-tailed deer that go into your backyard and eat your gardens. What we have found is that the vast majority of people who live adjacent to Riverwood welcome the deer. It's not that they willingly give up their gardens, but they do welcome having a deer or a possum or a red fox in their area. And then the other thing that comes out of Yellowstone is managing large predators such as black bears and grizzly bears. The notion that you don't feed a bear came out of the 1950s when Yellowstone had so many black bears and so many people feeding them that it became a problem. And then came the notion that if you feed a bear, you're going to kill the bear because the bear will lose its fear of people. Now, I am starting to see signs in Mississauga that suggest you should not feed coyotes or red fox or anything bigger than songbirds. And that's another lesson from Yellowstone. We know that if you start to feed coyotes, they're going to come around. And I know that some of the people that go to Riverwood feed coyotes and they think they're doing a wonderful thing. But maybe you should have listened to the news yesterday when the police shot the coyote because it had bitten two people. Managing our predators, managing our wildlife is keeping them so that they don't rely on us. They're going to get habituated to us, but we don't want them to think of us as a source of food. And coyotes that come to your backyard, raccoons that come to your backyard to get fed, and I'm not talking bird feeders here. I'm talking about raccoons that you're putting food out, or coyotes that you're putting out chicken breasts, or throwing out dog food for foxes. That is altering the animal's behavior. And they start to come to people, and invariably, that's when you get problems. And it can be a little problem. I remember when I was up in Algonquin Park, somebody came to the visitor center and said they'd been bit by a bear. And when we said, well, what did you do? And the person said, oh, I was feeding the bear and I ran out of food and it went up to my hand and I jerked my hand away and look, it cut my finger. I want you to shoot the bear. Well, hold on now. Let's just think this through. Whose fault is it that this actually happened? And very clearly, it wasn't the bear's fault. It was the person who was feeding the animal. Now, we could get rid of coyotes. We could trap them. We could hunt them. But the fact is that the coyotes are here and they will come back in. There's a whole reservoir of coyotes out there around Mississauga that are looking for a safe haven to come. And Riverwood, Mississauga, the GTA provides that safe haven where they're not hunted and they're going to come in. So one of the lessons from Yellowstone is let's manage the wildlife so that we don't let them get too friendly, but let's create sort of an environment where they get along with us and we get along with them. So get rid of the coyotes that know how to behave around us. You're inviting coyotes that don't know how to behave around us. And it's not just you seeing the coyote. It's the coyote that tries to cross the road and doesn't have any idea how to deal with traffic that gets killed. It's the coyote that, comes in and is a problem because it hangs around schoolyards. Well, you don't want that. So with wolves, I remember one time in Yellowstone, we were photographing some wolves, and it was a young, fully grown male, and it was very used. It came up to within 3 feet of me, which was quite an experience. I said, "Hello, wolf," and I couldn't take a picture of it because my camera doesn't focus that close. So the wolf and I looked at each other, and I didn't give it any food or any encouragement, and it trotted away. But other people were doing that, so along comes the rangers, and they have a shotgun that goes bang really loud, and that scared the wolf off. And if it didn't get the message from that, they had a beanbag that habituated the wolf or taught the wolf, don't go near people, it's not safe. And that worked. And Yellowstone's wolf watching was superb. So there are lessons to be learned. There's lessons about invasive species and managing them. Yellowstone has its own share of invasive species, but not to the extent that Riverwood does, because Riverwood is much smaller, it's much more compact. Yellowstone's biggest problem right now is a warming climate that is shrinking certain habitats, like the alpine habitat, where you don't get the same mixture of plants that the bighorn sheep and the mountain goats need. As that habitat shrinks, and there's not enough space for the animals. We are in a position in Riverwood where we can expand our habitat, but we are still experiencing climate change. We're getting more flooding events. We're seeing different animals, and there are lessons there. Wildlife in Yellowstone is adapting to the differences in climate, and our wildlife are adapting to the differences in climate. Can they do it fast enough? Well, that's another question, but they are adapting. One of the things that we see is birds migrating sooner and staying later. We have robins that would never have spent the winter here, but have adapted to feeding off the berries and food that we leave around. Cardinals that have come up. So we can see those changes. Yellowstone has animals that have arrived. White-tailed deer are moving into Yellowstone, the park itself, from outside. Back in the 70s and 80s, we never saw Yellowstone, or never saw white-tailed deer in Yellowstone. Now, they're not common, but they're there. Cougars have re-entered Yellowstone. They are migrating from other places. There were a few down in the Grand Tetons, but now you're seeing them in Yellowstone. I saw my first cougar about 30 years ago in Yellowstone, just as a flash, running across the road, and they weren't supposed to be there, but they obviously were. And Yellowstone has now acknowledged that there are maybe 10 or 15 pair of cougar within the entire park. Not very many, but for cougars, that's a significant increase. So we're seeing things that are changing. We're seeing wildlife communities that are evolving, and we're seeing that at Riverwood too. You look at the list of birds that we have. We've got a list of 184 species of birds. We don't see all 184 species of bird each and every year. There's a core group, 120, 130 species that you're probably going to see at Riverwood. But then you get some other birds moving through. One of our birders just remarked on his webpage that there's a rufous hummingbird in Oakville or someplace. I'm not sure where the sighting was, but it was unusual at this time of year to have a rufous hummingbird. I don't think it's on our list. It might show up because it was blown in by the wind or something. We may put it on our list, but it may never turn up. Red-headed woodpeckers. We haven't seen a red-headed woodpecker here, well, really officially ever that I can recall. in Riverwood. One was seen by one of our volunteers in Arundel. That was about 20 years ago. I heard about a red-headed woodpecker being seen over in Hamilton, a juvenile. So maybe there's hope. Maybe we're going to see that. Monitoring wildlife and what they do is another lesson from Riverwood or from Yellowstone. Yellowstone has really been the forefront of wildlife research in North America. And so has the Serengeti in Africa. And from those places, we've learned to appreciate the ecology. So there's a lot to learn. And I think at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions, and maybe you'll take me in some other direction. So Stephanie, I will go back to you and you can pass on some questions to me.
Thanks so much, Dave. Yeah, if anybody has any questions for Dave about what he talked about today, please comment in the chat bar or the Q&A section, and we will try to get to it. The first kind of question that I had that came in was actually about the coyotes. Do you take issues with the dispatching of coyotes that are posing a threat to humans? Why can't they be relocated? So I think this was in reference to the one that was recently dispatched near here.
I think in fairness to the police officers that shot the coyote, you have to look at the amount of time they spent trying to capture that coyote and move it out of the area, and the coyote outsmarted them. That's, you know, unfortunate. The coyote was shot. I don't know that it was the right coyote. I mean, they might be able to do DNA analysis in its teeth and find a bit of human DNA in there that will confirm it. Most people couldn't tell one coyote from another coyote. So yeah, there are some issues around that. I think the police made the best decision, or the wildlife people, I don't think it was just police, made the best decision that they could make under the circumstances. I would take a lot more umbrage if it was a bear up in a tree, because we know that the first instinct, if there's a bear in a tree up in Aurelia or Bracebridge or wherever, you shoot the bear, used to shoot the bear, and that was the end of it. But that really upsets people. And I think politically, police are less likely to go around shooting bears. Coyotes still have a fairly bad press. People are afraid of them. I think the coyotes are deserving of that. I've worked with a lot of coyotes. We've had coyotes den very close to the buildings at Riverwood. They've never been a problem. But you get a habituated coyote that thinks of you as food, that's when you're going to get some nipping. And it's not the police that are responsible for shooting that coyote. It's the person who fed that coyote that signed its death warrant. So yeah, I don't think that's the answer you're hoping for, but I would be really against an all-out war on coyotes. I think that's foolish. But that particular case, yeah, probably the right decision. But it's because we created it. Coyote did not create that situation. Right. Stephanie, back to you.
Yeah, I was just actually going to tell an anecdote. When I worked up north, there was a problem bear, as they called it, that was being fed by people, whether it be by hand or on their campgrounds, just people leaving food out. And it was approaching people, and it lost its fear of people, basically. And so they had relocated it, I believe 3 times, about 4 hours away from where it was. And each time it got back to that location within the day and was back on that same campground. And finally it was dispatched, and a lot of people were angry about it, but that's the result of people feeding animals, right? Is yeah, it's going to kill them, unfortunately. So yeah, it's sad that happened to the coyote, but this is something that we need to kind of figure out as a community too, right?
Mm-hmm. And John Tory was on the news today or yesterday saying that the city of Toronto welcomes wildlife and is proud of its wildlife communities. And I think that is the way we should go. I just find that whether you're in Yellowstone or in Serengeti, there is a tremendous amount of fear about predators. People don't really understand these animals. They think of a black bear as a very dangerous animal and something that should be feared. It should be respected. They think of a coyote as a dangerous wolf that's at the door. But again, it's respect, not fear. And you should be able to feel fairly confident walking through Riverwood that you're not going to be attacked by a coyote. You're not going to be attacked by, you're more likely to be attacked by a dog. And the reason for that is dogs are really habituated to people, and the dog doesn't fear people. The coyote does. And we also don't respect dogs. You see people going up to dogs and they want to pet the little dog because it's so cute, but the dog might be a German Shepherd that might be in a bad mood and it might just attack you. More people are hurt by pet animals and cattle than are ever hurt and killed by bears, coyotes, grizzly bears, bison, elk, you name it. It's the animals that we live with that are the greatest danger, and to us. And you know, if I'm out walking, I meet a dog, I always ask the owner's permission to pet the dog. And if the owner says no, then I don't. And if I'm walking one of my daughter's dogs, I take the lead from my daughter. Usually she's with me, whether or not that dog should get interact. So, you know, you got to be smart. It's our fault. I've seen a couple of questions come up about where the Pinchon property is.
Yes, yeah.
Pinchon property is accessed off of Mississauga Road, north of Vernonthorpe. Once you cross the 403, you'll see this property. It's an old apple orchard. It's a small piece of property, very important to the deer because it's an old apple orchard. There are plans that, please support these plans, to build a bridge across the Credit River so that people can extend the trail up into there and then follow the trail back into the valley and eventually go all the way up to Meadowvale. There are still some properties that have to be brought in line with that plan, but the Pinchon property would be a wonderful addition to Riverwood. It would allow us to lead walks into different places, expand our education program. I didn't even talk about education programs in Yellowstone and the Serengeti and in here, but I mean, our education programs, getting field research done, that basically comes out of the experiences from those parks. Teaching people about wildlife, teaching people about ecology is really important. And that's one of the reasons we have our education programs, Education Naturally and Leads. And that's one of the reasons we do these talks, is to educate people. So the Pinchon property is really neat. It's not very well developed. I don't think there's any washroom facilities on it. But it's a neat little place to wander around and explore. So that's where it is. And thank you for asking. Janet, was it asking?
Janet, yeah. Thanks, Dave. Another question came in from Facebook. And this one is about dogs, actually. And I wonder how the wildlife feel about dogs running loose in conservation areas. And then they referred to seeing dogs actually running in the Credit River while the deer were trying to cross.
Yeah. Dogs, once you take a dog off a leash, you've released an invasive species. Dogs are not native to here. And they behave in some ways like a wolf. Years and years ago, I wrote an article for Ontario Outdoors magazine about dogs killing deer. And they don't do it very often, but dogs that kill deer, when the story, where my story was set, actually attacked a human being and chased him right onto his porch. And he had to go into his farmhouse and he shot 3 of the dogs. And these were people's pets that were allowed to run free, had killed a couple of deer and other animals. So dogs running off leash to me are, as bad as garlic mustard or any other invasive species. I know you like to do it, but if a dog gets after a deer, not only is it disrupting the animal, it probably isn't going to kill it, but it's disrupting the animal's routine. And in the winter, when deer are stressed with a lack of food, letting your dogs go loose and chasing them, that's really putting stress on the deer. If it's a doe, it could cause her to lose her fawns. So I am very much against dogs off leash. And the problems we have in Riverwood with animals, it's not the coyotes that we get complaints about. It's not deer attacking people. It's not owls swooping down on them. It's dogs, and dogs chasing other animals. So yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. I wish people wouldn't do it. I wish there was more enforcement to stop them from doing it. And I know that some of you people have very well-behaved dogs that will walk at your knee and stay there and not wander off. But there are rules, and I think the rules need to be obeyed and enforced. And letting your cat wander around free is equally bad. Even in your backyard, cats are one of the biggest problems facing our songbirds. We need to have you stop that too. Just cat on a leash. I have certain friends that still let their cats out. I'll get emails from them, no doubt. Sorry, Steph. I'm publicizing here.
No, that's awesome. People are just commenting on your photographs and how much they love your photos. And then there was just a comment here from Jude that says, thanks for another great presentation. Was at Riverwood this morning and had a mink in the middle of the path. Could not help but smile. Now I want to get myself to Yellowstone. Thank you.
Yeah, Yellowstone is spectacular. And the time to go to Yellowstone, if you go mid-May to early June, is just wonderful. That's when all the babies start to come out, and you see baby cubs and baby coyotes and wolves and elk. But it's also a time to see some real drama where grizzly bears are hunting elk calves. And it is spectacular. So yeah, get to Yellowstone if you can, when it's safe to do so. But don't make it too popular. I still want to go there myself.
Yeah, I was just going to say, everyone's going to rush there now that we're kind of getting back to normality and we can start traveling again soon. So that's all the questions we have today. Dave, were you going to say something else there?
Just talk a little bit about roads. Algonquin Park, if you've ever been to Algonquin Park, and I know you have, Stephanie, it has one road going through the park. Banff National Park has one major road going to the national park. Those roads are wonderful, but they provide limited access to the other part of the park. What Yellowstone does, it has a figure 8, 2 loops, and a few other roads. And it's not a main traffic road. You don't take Yellowstone as a shortcut from Huntsville to Ottawa. It is Yellowstone. You go there to see Yellowstone. So one of the things that I think Riverwood needs to do is to have loop trails that go around and allow you to wander, but not put you all on one trail at one time. And again, that's something that we've had discussions about, and I think there are plans to expand our trails in such a way to manage people, give them a way to see the park, and not put all the stress on the column trail or the red trail or whatever. So another lesson to be applied.
Dave, there's actually one more question for you too. And somebody's wondering if you're going to be having another photography class. They're interested.
Yes, if everything goes well and they keep me around Riverwood a bit longer, yeah, I would be happy to offer another photography class, and probably you'll see an announcement about that very soon in the new year. Stephanie and I have already started talking about that possibility. So we'll hopefully see you for that. And, I guess that's going to have to wrap it up because I'm going to have to head out myself. Thanks as always, Steffi. Thank you, people, for enjoying it. If you go to Riverwood, enjoy it. Just try and stay on the trails.
Thanks so much, Dave, for another webinar. We might see you on Thursday afternoon. We'll keep everyone updated on that, but check out our events page and our donation page as well if you're interested in supporting us further after this program. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
And an autographed copy of my Black Bear book purchased through Riverwood contributes to Riverwood, and I'll even come over and sign it and autograph it for you so that there's a Christmas gift. The Christmas shopping is solved.
That's awesome. Just get it for everyone, all of your relatives.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.